Greetings, friends. It's me, Wayman, and I just wanted to come on and do a video concerning death, sacrifice, resurrection, and salvation. And Walter Burkert, in his book Homo Necans, discusses this at length on page 295, and he's discussing here the Eleusinian mysteries. And this is rather lengthy, but hang in there, and you'll notice a lot of the ideas and concepts that were carried over into a religion that we're very familiar with today, Christianity. So here it is on page 295. The place, tradition, priestly families, and ritual as a characteristic communication and formative experience remained constant. Everything revolved around the encounter with death, which was celebrated in sacrifice. Even for the Mistai, death was a fact and could not be shrugged off. The hope of the initiate was that in the selfsame death he would be blessed. He had learnt that, as a funerary epigram from the imperial epoch puts it, both simply and memorably, for mortals, death is no evil. It is, rather, the good. Surprisingly, the dreadful gods of the underworld put on a friendly face, and the mysteries effected a reconciliation with death, hence that blessed with which the Mistai mutually reinforced their faith. The festival bond is archaic, as is the concept of an elite group that sees the bliss of the initiate only in contrast to the uninitiate who will lie in the mire. Ironically objective, Herodotus gives a similar description of the belief in immortality among the Getae, who were convinced that Exalmus, that he and his drinking companions and their descendants would not die. Membership in the tribe and participation in festive eating and drinking guarantees one's hopes for the next world. Examples can be adduced from primitive societies showing how initiation, puberty rites, or induction into a secret society determine one's status both in the here and now and after death. After all, cohesive, archaic societies naturally conceive of themselves as a living among their own dead, who play a determinate role in their lives. In order to reach a new plane of existence in the initiation ritual, one must normally undergo sufferings, an encounter with death, through which death is overcome in sacrifice, in the act of killing, and the will to live rises triumph over the falling victim. After this, a real death seems no more than a repetition anticipated long ago. The ritual shifts anxiety in such a way that the resultant formative forces work towards the continuance of the social forms in the present. Interpretations on these lines that proceed from the initiation ritual have deeper foundations than those based only on agricultural magic. Neolithic agriculture was, after all, shaped by older traditions. For the cultivated, city-dwelling Greeks or Romans, the path to Eleusis was a regression to the goddess of grain, which was Demeter, to the growing forces of the plant world. At its core, this regression went back yet further beyond agriculture to the hunting and sacrificial ritual. If we use the word primitive in this regard, it is not in the sense of imperfect, silly, or defective, but rather basic. It connotes simple, self-evident suppositions that an individual cannot live in isolation, that he is dependent on the social grouping from which he came, and that the death of the individual is an integral part of the communal life, for which reason the encounter with death is unavoidable. This, in turn, can elicit both the triumph, ecstasy of survival, and the willingness to die. The fact that in the course of life one can take another's place, feeding itself, begetting, and dying, is unalterable. Indeed, to the Greek, it is divine, and one can only hope that the gods will be merciful in the process. So he goes on in that chapter, and it was a wonderful book, a little bit outdated, but he touched upon a lot of the ideas that we see in modern views of Christianity. And it ends up still being a rather violent religion. I think that saying that Christ was an ultimate sacrifice, human sacrifice was always an ultimate sacrifice, and to say that the sacrificial period is over with Christ is simply false. Every time we take communion, every time we eat the wafer, the blood, wine that was crushed, we consume the deity, and the crushed grain that made the wafer, and the chewing and the ingestion of it, of the deity, we are eating blood and drinking blood and eating flesh. And just like the libations poured out, dripped to the ground into the underworld as a libation to the deities above and to the afterlife, and the same kind of beautiful scenes that you get with Odysseus traveling to the underworld and seeing his mother. It almost makes you emotional reading those sorts of ideas, where he tries to hug his mother and he is unable to because she is a phantom, and they can only talk when they drink blood. And also when in the Aeneid, Aeneas is taken through the Elysian fields, he sees the heroes in the land of the blessed, and he is given the golden bough. Beautiful stuff, but ideas like those are still thought about today. You hear some of the modern versions of what heaven will be like. They're just a continuation of that epic. So, I don't know, friends. Let me know what you think. What I've been thinking about is, how do we incur guilt? How is that seen? And why is it that belief systems are so violent? And rather than helping the neighbors, they decide to kill things. And rather than kill things in repentance, to lift off that perceived guilt. And how real is that guilt? Is it a false perception? Let me know what you think. Take care, friends, and remember, if everybody's thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking.